The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as I adjusted the table settings for my in-laws' 40th anniversary celebration. Everything had to be perfect. Victoria Thompson wouldn't accept anything less in her precious family mansion, the same mansion she'd been threatening to kick me out of for the past 3 years. Emily, my mother-in-law's sharp voice cut through the air. Those are the wrong champagne glasses. How many times must I remind you that we only use the Waterford crystal for family events? I carefully kept my expression neutral as I replaced the glasses. Of course, Victoria, my mistake. Classic Emily, my sister-in-law Amanda sneered from the doorway. Still clueless about proper etiquette even after 3 years of marriage. Once a waitress, always a waitress. I thought about the property deed locked in my office safe and smiled. Let them enjoy their superiority for a few more hours. 3 years ago, when their precious son David brought home a waitress instead of the society girl they'd picked out for him, the Thompson family had made their disapproval crystal clear. Victoria had called me a gold digger at our engagement party. Amanda had spread rumors that I was pregnant, trying to trap David. Even David's father, Richard, despite his outward politeness, had insisted on a prenup that would leave me with nothing if we divorced. What they didn't know was that while I served coffee at that high-end restaurant, I was also quietly building an empire. My cute little hobby of buying and flipping properties had turned into a multi-million-dollar real estate investment company, carefully hidden under layers of corporations and LLCs. The tips I'd saved from waitressing had funded my first purchase, a foreclosed condo I'd renovated and sold for triple the investment. David knew about my success, of course. He'd watched me build my business from the ground up, supported my decision to keep waiting tables even after I didn't need to. Let them underestimate you, he'd said. They'll learn eventually. That evening would be the eventually. Emily. Victoria called again. Where are the place cards? Don't tell me you forgot to pick them up from the calligrapher. I produced the hand-lettered cards from a silver box. Right here, Victoria. She snatched them from my hands, inspecting each one with critical eyes. Well, at least you didn't ruin these, though I still don't understand why David insisted you help plan this party. It's a family event after all. Yes, Amanda chimed in, walking over to adjust a flower arrangement I'd spent an hour perfecting. Family only, but David felt sorry for you, I suppose, since you have no real family of your own. The jab about my orphan status. Parents dead in a car crash when I was 12, raised by a grandmother who'd passed away just before I met David, would have hurt 3 years ago. Now I just added it to the mental list of debts to be settled. The guests began arriving at 6, the cream of society, all old money and older names. I played my assigned role perfectly, the humble wife, grateful to be included, slightly out of her depth among such elegance. Victoria and Amanda basked in their apparent superiority, exchanging knowing looks every time I used the wrong fork or committed some imagined faux pas. David, playing his part, kept a protective arm around me. He knew what was coming. We planned this moment carefully. After dinner, Victoria rose for her speech. She had exactly enough champagne to loosen her tongue, but not enough to slur her words. Richard and I are so blessed, she began, to have built this legacy together. This house has been in the Thompson family for 3 generations. Our children grew up here, and God willing, our grandchildren will too. She paused to give me a pointed look, another dig at my so far childless state. Family is everything to us, she continued, though sometimes family can be diluted by unfortunate additions. More pointed looks in my direction. But the Thompson bloodline remains strong, and this house will always belong to true Thompsons. I caught David's eye. He nodded slightly. Actually, Victoria, I said, rising from my seat, I should mention something about the house. Sit down, Amanda hissed. Nobody wants to hear from the help. I opened my clutch and removed an envelope. 6 months ago, when the bank began foreclosure proceedings due to some unfortunate investment decisions. I glanced at Richard, who suddenly looked very pale. Someone bought this house. Victoria's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. What nonsense are you talking about? Richard handled that situation. No, Victoria. Richard tried to handle it. He begged every bank in town for a loan. But his credit was shot, and the Thompson family name doesn't carry the weight it used to. The room had gone deadly quiet. Even the servers had stopped circulating to watch the drama unfold. Fortunately, I continued removing the property deed from the envelope. A real estate investment company called Phoenix Properties stepped in, bought the house for cash, allowed the Thompson family to continue living here under a very generous lease agreement. Richard's face had gone from pale to gray. He knew what was coming. Phoenix Properties, I smiled, is owned by me. The silence shattered as Victoria's champagne glass hit the floor. That's impossible, Amanda shrieked. You're just a waitress. You can't even afford designer clothes without David's money. Actually, David spoke up, I've been wearing the designer clothes Emily buys me for the past 2 years. My trust fund ran out long ago. Bad investments run in the family, it seems. I distributed copies of the property deed to the stunned guests. I've enjoyed watching you play Lady of the Manor, Victoria, but I think it's time we discuss some changes to the living arrangements, starting with those Waterford crystal glasses you're so fond of. Victoria swayed on her feet. Richard, do something. But Richard was staring at the deed, recognition dawning in his eyes. He'd seen the paperwork before, had signed a lease agreement himself. He just hadn't known who owned Phoenix Properties. You? He looked at me with new eyes. You were the buyer? All this time. All this time, I confirmed. While you were calling me a gold digger, I was signing the checks that kept you from bankruptcy. While you were mocking my waitress past, I was adding to my property portfolio. And while you were threatening to kick me out of the family mansion, I smiled. I was legally becoming your landlord. Amanda lunged for the deed in my hands, but David stepped between us. Careful, sis. That's no way to treat your landlady. Victoria found her voice at last. This is absurd. We'll fight this. Our lawyers will. Your lawyers, I interrupted quietly, are already on my payroll. Who do you think handled the purchase? Would you like their number? It's on the lease agreement you signed without reading. The party dissolved into chaos after that. Amanda stormed out, slamming doors. Victoria had to be helped to her room, alternating between tears and threats. Richard just sat in his chair, staring into space, perhaps calculating just how much power they'd lost. As the guests departed, whispering excitedly among themselves, I began collecting the Waterford crystal glasses. David helped, both of us working in comfortable silence until the dining room was cleared. Feel better? He asked, pulling me close. Much, I replied. But this is just the beginning. What's next? I smiled, thinking of all the documents in my safe, the evidence of their tax evasion, the proof of Richard's embezzlement from his own company, the records of Amanda's insider trading. Next, I said, we teach them the true meaning of family values. The morning after the anniversary party, I sat in my home office, my real office, not the small desk Victoria had grudgingly allowed me in the mansion's library. Multiple screens displayed my property portfolio, news alerts, and security camera feeds from the Thompson estate. I watched Victoria pacing the garden, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly as she presumably plotted her counterattack. My own phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night. Society matrons who had previously snubbed me at charity events were suddenly eager to do lunch. Amanda's socialite friends wanted to know if the rumors were true. Had the waitress-turned-wife really owned the Thompson mansion all along? Your mother is trying to access the family trust, David reported, bringing me coffee. The proper way, unlike Victoria's passive-aggressive habit of serving me lukewarm tea in chipped cups. She's already called 3 different banks. I smiled, opening a folder on my laptop. The trust that was emptied 6 months ago to cover Richard's gambling debts? That should be an interesting conversation. The security feed showed Amanda's Mercedes screeching up the driveway. She stormed into the garden, waving her phone at Victoria. I turned up the volume on the feed. They've frozen my accounts, Amanda shrieked. All of them, even my private offshore one. Victoria grabbed the phone, her face paling as she read whatever was on the screen. How did they know about those accounts? Nobody knew about those accounts. I knew, I murmured, watching their panic unfold. I've known for 2 years. David leaned over my shoulder to watch. When did you figure it out? Remember that charity gala where Amanda got drunk and bragged about her foolproof investment strategy? She was too busy mocking my waitress uniform to notice I was serving at her table. It's amazing what people will say when they think the help isn't listening. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. We need to talk. Privately. No, I texted back, we don't. But your SEC investigator would like to talk to you. Check your email for the appointment details. Seconds later, Richard burst into the garden, face red as he showed his phone to Victoria and Amanda. The security feed captured their meltdown in high definition. She can't do this. Amanda was crying now, mascara streaking down her face. Daddy, fix it. You always fix everything. But Richard just collapsed onto a garden bench, head in his hands. He knew exactly what I had on him. 3 years of careful investigation, following money trails, documenting every illegal transaction and backroom deal. The proof of embezzlement from his company, the insider trading he'd orchestrated through Amanda's accounts, the tax evasion schemes he'd hidden behind offshore shells. I'd given them until noon to clear up their personal belongings, I told David. The moving company arrives at 1 to put everything in storage. He raised an eyebrow. Everything. Everything that actually belongs to them, I clarified. Which, after the forensic accountants trace the source of funds for each purchase, won't be much. Victoria appeared at my office door then, trying to maintain her dignity despite her smeared makeup and trembling hands. We need to discuss this like civilized people. I gestured to a chair. Please sit. Would you like some coffee? I've learned quite a bit about proper service over the years. She remained standing. This vendetta is childish. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me? I interrupted softly. Let's review, shall we? You called me a gold digger at my engagement party. You forced your son to make me sign a prenup. You've spent 3 years belittling me, mocking my background, and treating me like a servant in my own home. Your home, she sputtered. This mansion has been in the Thompson family for. This mansion, I cut in, was built by your husband's grandfather using money he embezzled from his business partners. Would you like to see the documentation? I found it quite fascinating reading. Victoria sank into the chair, her legs giving out. What do you want? Want? I already have everything I want. The mansion. The evidence of your family's crimes. The power to destroy everything you've spent decades building on a foundation of fraud and theft. Please, she whispered, and for the first time in 3 years, there was no condescension in her voice. We're family. Family? I laughed. Now we're family. Not last night when you were mocking my orphan status. Not last month when you told your friends I wasn't a real Thompson. Not last year when you excluded me from the family Christmas card. David stepped forward. Mother, you should go pack. The movers will be here soon. She turned to him, tears welling up. David, sweetheart, you can't let her do this to us. We're your parents. Yes, he agreed, you are. And for 28 years, you controlled every aspect of my life. You chose my schools, my friends, my career. You even tried to choose my wife. But you chose wrong, Mother. You thought Emily was beneath us, when really, we were beneath her. Victoria fled the office, her sobs echoing down the hallway. By noon, the security feeds showed a parade of luxury cars pulling up to the mansion. Amanda's friends coming to help her pack. Richard's business associates probably hoping to salvage what they could from the impending scandal. Victoria's society friends no doubt eager to witness the Thompson family's fall from grace firsthand. I watched it all from my office, forwarding relevant clips to my lawyers and the SEC investigators. 3 years of surveillance, of carefully gathering evidence while playing the role of the humble, grateful wife. The perfect revenge served ice cold. The movers are here, David announced at 1 o'clock precisely, and you'll never guess who else showed up. I checked the security feed and smiled. Charlotte Preston, Victoria's oldest friend and fiercest society rival, was supervising the movers with obvious glee. She'd been the one to recommend me for the waitressing job at her country club 3 years ago. The job that had put me in David's path. What Victoria never knew was that Charlotte had been my grandmother's best friend, had helped me invest my inheritance, had introduced me to the real estate developers who'd mentored me, had watched me build my business empire while serving drinks to the people who looked down on me. Should we go downstairs? David asked. Make sure they don't take anything they shouldn't. I shook my head, pulling up the inventory list on my laptop. The security team has detailed photos of every item in the house with documentation of their true ownership. Let them try to sneak something out. It'll just give us more leverage. Amanda made one last attempt at defiance, trying to load a painting into her car. This was a gift from my father, she protested when security stopped her. A gift bought with stolen money. I replied from the top of the stairs. Would you like to explain its provenance to the FBI agents who are on their way to question your father? I'm sure they'd be very interested in how a mid-level executive afforded a genuine Monet. She left the painting. By sunset, the Thompson family was gone. Victoria, Richard, and Amanda had moved into a suite at the Preston Hotel. Charlotte's final twist of the knife, making them dependent on her charity. Their accounts were frozen pending investigation. Their reputations were in tatters. Their precious family legacy was revealed as a house of cards built on fraud and stolen money. I walked through the emptied mansion, now truly mine in every sense. The rooms seemed bigger without the weight of their pretension filling them. David found me in the dining room, where just last night they'd made their last stand as society royalty. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me. "Not happy," I corrected. "Satisfied. There's a difference." "What now?" I smiled, thinking of the plans I'd been making. Now we turn this mansion into something worthwhile. A home for aged-out foster kids, maybe. Give them the support my grandmother gave me. Help them build their own success stories. Mother will have a stroke when she hears about that. Mother will be too busy with her legal problems to care. The SEC investigation is just the beginning. Wait until the IRS gets involved. Later that night, as we sat in a garden where I'd watched Victoria's meltdown that morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. "Your grandmother would be so proud. You pulled off the longest con I've ever seen." "Not a con," I texted back. "Just a very patient revenge." David raised his glass in a toast. "To the gold digger who owned the gold mine all along." I clinked my glass against his, thinking of all the times they'd made me serve drinks at their parties. To patience, preparation, and proper documentation. My phone buzzed again. "Amanda, probably drunk. You'll regret this. Family is forever." I showed the message to David, who laughed. "Should we tell her about the offshore accounts we haven't frozen yet? The ones she thinks are still secret?" "No," I replied, sending the account details to my lawyers. "Let's save something for next week. After all, revenge is a dish best served in courses." The next morning, I had the Waterford crystal packed away and donated to a local museum. In its place, I set out the simple glasses my grandmother had left me. Not as expensive, not as showy, but earned through honest work and preserved with real love. Victoria's society friends called one by one, shifting allegiances as smoothly as they sipped their morning tea. They'd always known something was off about the Thompsons, they claimed, had never really approved of how they treated me. Would I be interested in chairing the hospital benefit this year? I declined each invitation politely but firmly. I had better things to do than play their games. The foster home wouldn't build itself, after all. "You know," David said as we reviewed plans for converting the mansion, "they never once asked why I went along with your plan. Why I helped you take down my own family. They think you're under my gold digger spell," I teased, "or that you're afraid of losing access to my money." He shook his head. "I helped because they needed to learn the lesson you taught me 3 years ago. True wealth isn't about crystal glasses and family names. It's about working hard, staying humble, and remembering where you came from. Even if where you came from was serving drinks to snobs. Especially then." I looked around at the mansion that had once represented everything I was supposedly unworthy of. Now it would become something truly valuable. A place of hope for kids like I had been, alone but determined to succeed. The perfect revenge wasn't just taking their home and exposing their crimes. It was transforming their symbol of exclusion and privilege into a force for good. And somewhere, I knew my grandmother was smiling.